Now, the second thing, understandably, that is very important for any society, now after they have the Decalogue and they were told how they need to treat slaves so that they don't repeat the mistakes of the other people, was then the nation building of respect. And so it starts off with parents. Honor your father and your mother. It's one of the words in the Decalogue, right? And so yes, because it is so important that you do honor those that's like your parents, right? Those that are taking care of you, those that gave you life, those that basically did everything for you so that you can be who you are. And that kind of respect doesn't stop just from a Western mind, maybe when you leave the house. But that's a kind of respect that will stay and ought to stay with you for till your parents are not there anymore. Okay, so it's not the kind of respect that you'll find, say, in a Chinese house where they will have the photos of the parents, the dead the grandparents, the parents, and will burn incense to them, etc. Right? You'll find it at lots of Chinese houses there in Thailand, and not that kind of respect because you're supposed to worship them, right? But the respect that you ought to give to them, as God said, because they are your parents. Don't disown them, right? That is one of those verses say you're not supposed to. If you do it, you're supposed to be killed. You're not supposed to hit them. Okay? Yeah. A strong society is based on strong families. When there's respect for the parents, like we see here, so it's so important. They had to have this in place so that they can build a strong family. And from the Decalogue, we know that if they respect their parents, then they will live long in the land that God gave them. Okay, not to have a long life, but live long because they'll have a strong society. God won't need to send those judgments on them. Okay, so yes, now with that out of the way, knowing respect. The third thing, ultimately, then a big part in this chapter is addressed, is the idea of, again, they are agrarian society, so they have cattle, they have oxen. Well, what happens when an ox kills someone? Right, and then all the rules concerning that, compensation. Yeah, so that they in their society would exactly know, okay, this is my ox, but it's an animal. So if the animal kills, right, I am kind of not guilty. But if I was informed that this animal, this ox, is prone to do these things and I don't do anything about it, then you are guilty. One thing as well mentioned there concerning digging a hole, and I spoke about that as well. The danger and the ox falling into it, and it's ultimately the animal dying, not the animal get out of the pit like my father. The few times, I can count it on one hand, the number of times we didn't go to church on a Sunday. And the excuse in those cases were really that we had to irrigate the farm because of superheat. So yes, and then we always quote the idea of the ox or the calf in the pit. And this is not the calf in the pit, this is no oxen and not taking the calf out, but dead, right? The ox that is dead. So, firstly, slaves, because they were slaves, so as to not do the same. Strong society starts with honor of the parents. And then ultimately, all of them, or the majority of them, would have had oxen. And how do you treat them? How do you treat each other? So those are purely logical from God's point of view, from even a human point of view. With these things, you ought to start. And so God starts with them to get that in place. Now, yes, okay, so you can say we don't see that we have a slave system anymore, right? So why do we need it? We don't really always, I don't live with my parents. So why do I need to honor my parents? I have my wife, I have my children, I have my own family. My parents over there, why do I need to honor them? I'm not a farmer. So why do I need to know about what to do with the ox or not do with the ox. So it's like nothing of this is important to me. But everything that here is ultimately important to us, not just because it's written in the word, but because we have the same kind of thing. Honor of parents, dishonoring your parent or not honoring your parents just because you don't live with them, because you're in an individualistic kind of society where that's not important, that's nonsense. It's one of the things I don't like about the Western culture is the individualistic culture is disrespect or not respect enough for the parents and therefore for society. So we have weak churches because we have weak families because we don't respect our parents anymore. And then we complain about wokeism and all those kinds of things, but it starts with us thinking that, oh, I have my own family now and I don't need to respect them anymore. No, wrong. Okay, slaves. Oh man, don't let me even go down this one. There are more slaves today than there's ever been. And I'm not only speaking of prostitution. There's so many women, men included, and I've met some of them through my years of ministry, who sells themselves out. Right? They're prostitute into. Okay, like no men living in a house there in Bangkok, for example. They from Laos. They can't even exit that place because their documents were taken away. They're basically just sex slaves in that place. But there are other kinds of slaves. People working for basically next to nothing. And refugees. Oh man, I know so many refugees that works for pittance, but at least they're not killed in a war or something like that. So, yeah, it is still a very big problem. And so for those like refugees, for example, not to become, if they one day may be set free, that they won't become like that. You might have been like that, right? To not then oppress others. Or just plain stand up for it. As a church, we need to stand up against this evil and to address it and to do something about it. Not just say, oh no, but we don't have slaves anymore. No, we still have. And we have more than at any point in history put together. Animals, yes, sure. Maybe you don't have oxen there and you're not living on a farm or anything like that, right? But you have another job where you work with, maybe you're a taxi driver, okay? Now, the way how you drive that car, who's responsible if you hit someone? How do you drive? Do you go out and get drunk and then drive a car or something like that? Do you do your job? When you build an instrument, a hammer even, that will be used for someone, do you build it in such a way so that if the guy hits the nail on the head kind of idea, that the thing won't splinter or split apart and come into his eyes and blind him or something like that? But you can adapt it. I mean, we all still have some other kind of job or something that we do. So these things are still relevant to us. It's very relevant. And so we need to follow the examples ultimately that God puts here. We need to treat others with respect, not enslave people. We need to respect our parents. And in our jobs, we need to do it such a way. Well, no, the good old Calvinistic way of do it for the glory of God, right? Like I always say, solo Deo Gloria. We do it for the glory of God. So that's why the Swiss has such good watches and chocolate and stuff like that. Because ultimately they're doing it for God. So next time you complain about a weak society, a weak church falling apart, think of how you treat your parents. Think of how you treat those who have nothing, who are enslaved by this world. Think of how you do your work. And then maybe instead of blaming everybody else, this party, this person, that person, this cult, this woman blaming men, white people blaming black people blaming brown people in between somewhere. No. See where you are wrong and correct that. So as a church, you need to understand these things so you can stand up for what is right and not just give in to the world and follow the ways. There's so many ways in which our even Christian, so-called Christian culture in certain countries is not Christian at all anymore. So take this chapter like a mirror and see where do you stand? How do you treat others ultimately, especially your parents?